Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you today that no matter what you are facing, no matter how dark the storm, how deep the valley, or how strong the winds of adversity, God is standing by you. He has not abandoned you, and He never will. You see, life is full of seasons. There are times of joy and times of sorrow, times of peace and times of struggle. But seasons are temporary. The pain you feel today is not permanent. The struggle you are going through is not the end of your story. God never promised that we wouldn't face trials, but He did promise that we would never face them alone. Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." That means when you walk through the fire, you won't be burned. When you go through deep waters, they won't overwhelm you. Why? Because God is standing right beside you. Listen to me carefully. Trouble is not a sign that God has left you. In fact, trouble is often proof that God is preparing you. Every great person in Scripture faced hardship before they walked in their destiny. Joseph was betrayed before he ruled Egypt. David faced Goliath before he became king. Even Jesus endured the cross before he wore the crown. You may be asking, why am I going through this? But the better question is, Lord, what are you teaching me through this? Your trials are not meant to destroy you. They are meant to develop you. God is using this season to shape you, to refine you, to prepare you for something greater. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." Life is full of changes, ups and downs, moments of joy and seasons of hardship. No one is exempt from challenges, but one truth remains unshaken. God's presence is permanent, even when circumstances shift. It is easy to feel discouraged when facing trials, especially when the season of difficulty seems unending. Hard times often make people question their faith, wonder if God is still with them, or even feel abandoned. But the reality is that seasons change, and hardship does not last forever. What feels like a never-ending storm today will eventually pass, and through it all, God remains constant. When difficulties arise, they have a way of clouding perspective. The human mind tends to focus on the pain, the loss, or the struggle, making it seem like there is no way out. However, just as natural seasons transition, winter does not last forever, nor does the night continue without morning. Seasons of hardship also have an expiration date. The trials that seem unbearable today are only temporary. They may feel overwhelming, but they are not permanent. In contrast, God's presence is eternal. He does not come and go based on circumstances, nor does He abandon His people when times get tough. His faithfulness is not seasonal, it is everlasting. In the Scriptures, many great men and women of faith endured seasons of intense difficulty, but they never remained in those situations forever. Joseph was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and imprisoned unjustly, but his suffering was only for a season. In the end, he was elevated to a position of great influence and authority. David, anointed to be king, spent years running for his life before finally ascending to the throne. Job lost everything, but his season of loss was not the conclusion of his story. These examples prove that hardship is not final, nor is it meant to define a person's destiny. One of the greatest mistakes people make during difficult seasons is allowing their circumstances to dictate their faith. Feelings of doubt, fear, and frustration can create the illusion that God is distant. But God's presence is not based on emotions. It is based on His unchanging nature. Just because someone does not feel God near them does not mean He is absent. He has promised never to leave nor forsake His people, and His promises are unbreakable. Difficult seasons serve a purpose even when that purpose is not immediately clear. They refine character, build resilience, and deepen trust in God. If every day were easy, there would be no need for faith. Faith grows strongest in adversity. It is in the wilderness that people learn to depend on God completely. It is in the valley that his presence becomes even more real. While the storm rages, he stands as a shelter. While the fire burns, he walks beside his people, just as he did with the 3 Hebrew boys in Babylon. The flames did not consume them because God was with them. The key to enduring hard seasons is to focus on what is unchanging. Circumstances shift, people come and go, but God remains the same. His love does not waver, his promises do not fail, and his presence does not diminish. Those who trust in him are never truly alone, no matter how isolating the struggle may feel. Looking beyond the temporary pain and fixing one's eyes on the eternal presence of God brings peace in the midst of chaos. The assurance that he is near, that he sees, and that he cares gives the strength needed to persevere. Though trials may seem overwhelming, they are never bigger than God. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who fed Elijah in the wilderness, and who raised Lazarus from the dead, is the same God who walks with his people today. He is not limited by circumstances, nor is he intimidated by hardship. He is a God of deliverance, a God of restoration, and a God of breakthrough. Those who hold on to him through every season will come out stronger, wiser, and closer to their divine purpose. Trials are an inevitable part of life. No one escapes difficulties. But the presence of hardship does not mean that God has abandoned his people. Instead, it is often proof that God is preparing them for something greater. Throughout history, every great person God used had to go through a process of refining, testing, and preparation. Struggles are not designed to break a person. They are meant to build, shape, and mold them into the person God created them to be. There is always a purpose behind every difficulty, even when it is not immediately clear. It is easy to question why challenges arise, especially when they come unexpectedly. People often assume that trouble means something is wrong, but many times trials are an indication that something is being set right. Just as a blacksmith must put metal through intense heat to strengthen it, God allows his people to go through seasons of pressure to refine them. Gold is purified in the fire, diamonds are formed under great pressure, and strong trees grow deep roots through strong wind. Growth never happens in comfort. Strength is not developed in ease. Purpose is not discovered without challenges. One of the greatest examples of preparation through trials is the life of Joseph. He had a divine dream of greatness, but before stepping into his destiny, he had to endure betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and imprisonment. To the natural eye, it may have seemed as though Joseph was being punished or forgotten. But in reality, every step of his journey was preparing him for leadership. He learned wisdom in Pharaoh's prison. He developed patience in Potiphar's house. He grew in character while being rejected by his brothers. The very trials that seemed like setbacks were actually divine setups for his elevation. Had he not gone through those hardships, he would not have been ready to manage a nation during a famine. David's journey was no different. Anointed as king at a young age, he did not ascend to the throne immediately. Instead, he found himself running for his life, hiding in caves and enduring years of hardship before stepping into his destiny. Every battle he fought, every betrayal he experienced, and every moment of struggle was preparing him to rule with wisdom and humility. His trials did not disqualify him. They shaped him into the king that Israel needed. Even Jesus himself had to endure suffering before stepping into glory. Before the resurrection came the cross. Before victory came the pain of betrayal, the agony of Gethsemane, and the suffering of Calvary. His greatest triumph was preceded by his greatest trial. If the Son of God had to go through difficulty before fulfilling his purpose, how much more will his followers experience the same? Many people want the promise without the process, the reward without the refinement, the blessing without the breaking. But God does not elevate unprepared people. He does not hand over great responsibility to those who have not been tested. Just as a teacher does not promote a student without first giving them an exam, God does not move his people to the next level without first ensuring they are ready. Tests come not to destroy, but to reveal what is inside. They expose weaknesses that need strengthening, attitudes that need adjusting, and faith that needs deepening. Hardship is never wasted in the hands of God. Every trial is part of a greater plan. What may feel like a delay is often divine preparation. What seems like a failure is often a setup for future success. What appears to be an obstacle is actually an opportunity for growth. Those who trust God through their trials will come out stronger, wiser, and ready to step into the destiny He has prepared for them. Life is full of challenges, and no one is exempt from trials. There will be moments of difficulty, times of uncertainty, and seasons of hardship, but God's promises remain true. He never guaranteed a life free of trouble, but He did assure His people that He would be with them in the midst of it all. His word declares that He is a refuge, a fortress, and a strong tower for those who put their trust in Him. He never said that weapons would not be formed against His people. He simply promised that they would not prosper. He never said there would be no fire, but He promised that those who walked through it would not be consumed. He never said there would be no storms, but He assured that those who build their lives on Him would not be shaken. Difficulties have a way of testing faith. When things are going well, it is easy to believe, easy to trust, and easy to praise. But when hardship comes, when prayers seem unanswered, when the future looks uncertain, that is when true faith is revealed. It is in those moments that people must choose to stand on the Word of God rather than the instability of their emotions. Feelings change, but His promises do not. Circumstances shift, but His faithfulness remains. What He has spoken cannot be undone by trials, setbacks, or opposition. He is not a man that He should lie, nor the Son of Man that He should change His mind. If He said He would be with His people, then no amount of trouble can alter that truth. History is filled with examples of men and women who clung to God's promises in the midst of adversity. The 3 Hebrew boys stood before the fiery furnace with unshaken faith, knowing that God was able to deliver them. But their faith was not based on whether or not they would be rescued. It was based on the unchanging nature of God. Even in the face of death, they refused to bow because they knew that their God was greater than the flames. And when they were thrown into the fire, He did not remove the furnace, but He stepped into it with them. The fire was real, the heat was intense, but they walked out without even the smell of smoke on them. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, but the promise of God's protection kept him safe. The lions were real, their hunger was real, but the presence of God was greater. Paul and Silas were beaten and thrown into prison, but instead of despairing, they worshiped. They understood that God's presence was not confined to good times. He was with them even in chains. Their praise shook the foundations of the prison, and their breakthrough came not because their circumstances changed first, but because they believed God's promises even while in captivity. God's promises are not dependent on human understanding. Many times, trials do not make sense. The struggles people face may seem unfair, unexpected, or even unbearable. But the Word of God is a foundation that does not waver under pressure. He has promised to be a present help in times of trouble. He has promised that those who wait on Him will renew their strength. He has declared that even though His people walk through the valley of the shadow of death, they do not have to fear, for He is with them. He has said that no weapon formed against His people will prosper, and that all things, good and bad, will work together for the good of those who love Him. Difficult seasons will come, but they will never be greater than the God who walks through them with His people. He does not abandon, He does not forsake, and He does not fail. Every word he has spoken is true. Every promise he has given is secure. And every trial is an opportunity to trust in his unchanging faithfulness. When difficult times arise, the natural response is often to ask, why is this happening to me? People want to understand why they are facing pain, hardship, or disappointment. It is easy to assume that suffering is a sign of failure, punishment, or misdirection. However, the greater question to ask is not, why am I suffering, but what is God teaching me through this? Every trial carries a lesson, and every hardship is an opportunity for growth. God never allows his people to go through difficulty without purpose. There is always something to be learned, something to be refined, and something to be strengthened. Throughout the Bible, God used trials to develop his people, not to destroy them. When the Israelites were led into the wilderness, it was not because God had abandoned them, but because he was preparing them. He wanted to teach them reliance, obedience, and trust. The wilderness was a place of testing, but it was also a place of transformation. Those who focused only on the discomfort of their situation missed the lesson and failed to enter the promised land. But those who sought to understand God's purpose in their journey were positioned for victory. Joseph could have asked, why did my brothers betray me? Why was I sold into slavery? Why was I thrown into prison? But instead of dwelling on the injustice, he recognized that God was working behind the scenes. His years of suffering were shaping him for leadership. Every trial he endured was preparing him for the moment he would save a nation from famine. If he had only focused on the pain, he would have missed the purpose. But because he sought God in the midst of his trials, he was able to say to his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. David, anointed as king, spent years running from Saul, hiding in caves and facing danger at every turn. He could have asked, why am I going through this if God has already called me to be king? But instead of questioning God's plan, he allowed the process to shape him. His time in the wilderness taught him humility, patience, and reliance on God. When he finally ascended to the throne, he was not just a warrior, he was a leader molded by hardship, tested by trials, and strengthened by faith. Paul, a man who performed miracles and spread the gospel across nations, faced shipwrecks, imprisonments, and beatings. He could have asked, why is this happening to me if I am doing God's work? But instead, he saw his trials as a means of deepening his faith and expanding God's kingdom. He declared that his sufferings were producing perseverance, character, and hope. His perspective allowed him to rejoice even in chains, because he understood that trials were not obstacles. They were instruments in God's hands. Jesus himself, facing the cross, did not ask, why must I suffer? Instead, he surrendered to the greater purpose behind his pain. In Gethsemane, he prayed, not my will, but yours be done. He understood that beyond the suffering was redemption, beyond the cross was resurrection, and beyond the pain was victory. His suffering was not in vain, and neither is the suffering of those who follow him. Difficulties come to teach, refine, and prepare. They reveal weaknesses that need to be strengthened, attitudes that need to be changed, and faith that needs to be deepened. Every challenge is an invitation to grow, to trust, and to discover more of God's purpose. Instead of asking why suffering has come, the focus should be on what God is revealing, what he is refining, and what he is refining his people for. Those who shift their perspective from frustration to faith will find that every trial is not a setback, but a setup for something greater. Pain is never without purpose. Though it may seem unbearable in the moment, every trial, every struggle, and every hardship is producing something greater. The difficulties faced today are shaping the strength needed for tomorrow. Just as muscles grow through resistance and endurance is built through pressure, the challenges of life are developing something within that cannot be gained through ease. Nothing valuable is ever formed without a process. Gold must go through fire to be purified. Diamonds are created under intense pressure. Strong trees develop deep roots by standing firm through storms. Likewise, the pain of today is preparing something far greater than what is seen in the present moment. There is no growth without struggle. A seed must break open in the ground before it can sprout. A caterpillar must endure the confines of the cocoon before it can emerge as a butterfly. The greatest victories are often preceded by the greatest challenges. Many people want the reward without the process. But God does not elevate those who have not been prepared. Every person used mightily by God has walked through seasons of hardship. But their pain was not wasted. Instead, it became the foundation for their purpose. Joseph's journey to leadership was not instant. He had to endure betrayal, slavery, and false accusations before stepping into his destiny. What seemed like a series of misfortunes was actually a divine setup. Every trial was equipping him for the day he would save a nation. Had he not faced difficulty, he would not have developed the wisdom, patience, and resilience required for his assignment. When he finally rose to power, he understood that his suffering was not for nothing. It had prepared him for something greater than himself. David's path to the throne was not smooth. Though anointed as king, he spent years in the wilderness, running from Saul and facing battles that seemed endless. Each trial was refining him, molding him into the leader Israel needed. His pain taught him to rely on God, to lead with humility, and to fight with courage. Had he not endured those years of hardship, he would not have been the king he was destined to be. His pain was producing the strength he would need to reign. Paul, a man dedicated to spreading the gospel, faced countless hardships. He was beaten, imprisoned, shipwrecked, and persecuted. Yet he declared that his sufferings were producing something far greater. He understood that his trials were shaping him, deepening his faith, and preparing him for the impact he was meant to have. Rather than seeing pain as an obstacle, he saw it as a tool in God's hands. His struggles did not weaken him, they strengthened him. Even Jesus, the Son of God, endured suffering before victory. Before the resurrection came the cross. Before the triumph came the agony of Gethsemane. His suffering was not meaningless. It was the very thing that brought redemption to the world. Through his pain, salvation was made possible. He embraced the process because he understood the purpose behind it. Pain is often misunderstood. Many see it as something to be avoided, but it is often the very thing that brings transformation. It teaches endurance, develops character, and refines faith. Those who allow the process to shape them will find themselves stronger, wiser, and more prepared for what lies ahead. The discomfort of today is not the end. It is the preparation for what is coming. Every tear, every struggle, and every hardship is producing something greater. The strength being built through pain today will be the foundation for victory tomorrow. Life has a way of testing faith through trials, setbacks, and unexpected challenges. In moments of difficulty, it is easy to feel overwhelmed, discouraged, and even tempted to give up. The pressure of adversity can make it seem as if the struggle will never end. But what must be understood is that hardships are not permanent. Every storm has an expiration date, and every trial will eventually pass. No matter how long the night seems, morning always comes. The key to victory is endurance, faith, and the ability to stand firm, even when circumstances try to shake confidence in God's promises. History is filled with those who faced impossible situations but refused to quit. They endured not because their circumstances changed immediately, but because they held on to the truth that breakthrough was on the way. Joseph endured years of suffering before stepping into his destiny. David faced countless battles before becoming king. Job lost everything but remained faithful, and in the end he was restored. None of them saw instant relief from their trials, but they trusted that God was still working even when things looked hopeless. Their ability to stand firm brought them into the fulfillment of what God had promised. Faith is not tested in times of comfort. It is proven in the fire of adversity. It is easy to believe when everything is going well, but true faith is revealed when life becomes difficult. Those who hold on to God through hardship will come out stronger, wiser, and more prepared for what lies ahead. Every challenge is an opportunity to grow. Every setback is a setup for something greater. The enemy wants people to believe that their struggles will last forever, but that is a lie. Breakthrough is coming, but it requires perseverance. Many give up too soon, walking away just before their victory arrives. They let discouragement convince them that things will never change. But endurance is what separates those who step into their destiny from those who miss it. A seed planted in the ground takes time to grow. If it is dug up too soon, it will never bear fruit. Likewise, many are in a season where God is preparing them for what is ahead, but they must not give up before they see the harvest. What feels like delay is often divine preparation. Paul understood the importance of pressing forward. He faced hardships, persecution, and suffering, yet he declared that he would not give up. He knew that his trials were temporary compared to the glory that was coming. He reminded believers to run the race with endurance, fixing their eyes on what is ahead rather than what is behind. His faith was not dependent on circumstances, but on the certainty of God's promises. Even Jesus, in his most difficult moment, did not quit. In Gethsemane, he could have chosen to walk away, but he endured because he knew the victory that was coming. He faced the cross with determination because he saw beyond the suffering to the joy that was set before him. His endurance brought salvation to the world. If he had given up, there would be no redemption, no resurrection, and no hope. His example shows that pressing forward, even in pain, leads to victory. Now is not the time to surrender to discouragement. Now is not the time to let weariness steal the promise that is ahead. Stand firm, hold on to faith, and refuse to quit. The breakthrough that seems far away is closer than it appears. God is working behind the scenes, aligning every detail, preparing every step, and setting the stage for something greater. Those who endure will see the reward. Those who trust will witness the fulfillment of what God has spoken. Your breakthrough is on the way. Keep going, keep believing, and never give up.